The first stage, really, when I began to get to know Jesus, was from my own grandmother. My own grandmother, every day, used to pray. So it was through prayer that I learned who Jesus is. And I began to be interested and curious about who Jesus is through my own grandmother, praying through Jesus to the Father. Every day, every evening, I used to go and sit at her, more or less at her lap, and listen first of all to her stories, traditional stories, and then she would wind up by praying to God through Jesus. So I became very curious to get to know who Jesus was. I could not get enough. And related to that, she told me, if you want to know more about Jesus, join the Sunday school. And the period I'm talking about, I was not even a Catholic. My mom went to a Protestant church. And the nearest church, of course, and the Catholic church was nowhere to be found in my area. So in that church, whose property my own mom had given to the Protestant church to build, I went there every Sunday. And since I was curious to know more about Jesus, the way it was organized, the Sunday school, was singing. Singing and reciting the scriptures. And then I began to realize why my grandma was so much infused with faith in Jesus. The source for her was the scriptures. But she was not telling me that. I had to discover on my own. In scripture, I became so interested in scripture that I excelled in knowing all the books of the Bible by heart. I could recite them, and actually I got a prize at the end of the year, around Christmas, when they were giving prizes to the best, and I got a prize for reciting the entire names of the books of the Old Testament and New Testament. So, I began very young. I just want to leave that there and then move on to the next stage. Still, I wasn't a Catholic, and I saw a marching band during the summer. And this marching band, I was curious where it came from. And I had the opportunity to ask, and I asked, and I was told this marching band comes from a Catholic school. I go home and tell my mom that I want to transfer from where I was near home to this school. And I insisted. It was very far, about 10 miles. And at the end, both my mom and dad allowed me to go to that Catholic school, which was boarding. And the first time I remember going to a Catholic church, it was very early in the morning. I was filing behind the boys, coming from the dorms, and very early in the morning, about 6 in the morning, and I did not know exactly what they did at the door. I saw them touch something at the door, but I didn't know what I saw their handbook, but I didn't know what they did with their hand. So I also touched it, and I licked it. And that did it. I began my march to get to know Jesus through this new place. And this is the second stage, when I got to know the pastor of the parish. Since I was a student in boarding school. I met Father Kavanagh, who was celebrating the Mass every day for us. And I got to know him in a wonderful way in which he kind of embraced me as a friend and as a caretaker, as a father, coming from so far away, 10 miles away. He would occasionally come to the school and ask me how I was. For me, he was a father figure. But more than that, as I began to see him celebrate, I knew that this person was a person of God. And I was interested to know more about what makes him to be so committed and every day coming to celebrate for us. So, first of all, the kindness and the commitment led me to try to know more about Jesus Christ that he was committed to. And before long, I was inquiring on how to become a priest, even before I was baptized. And I even approached Father Kavanagh and asked him whether I could be an altar server. And for some reason, he made an exception. And I began to serve at the altar. The mystery of that place attracted me. And I wanted to know more. That was not enough. After I went to the seminary, high school seminary, completed high school seminary. But the dramatic event that really taught me about God's knowledge was my own dad's death. I was about 25, about 3 years before my ordination. My dad suddenly died in an automobile accident in which 3 others with him died. I was called in the middle of the night, the police asked for my name, I identified myself, and they asked me to go directly about 800 miles from the city of Nairobi to identify my own dad. Now, what happened around that bereavement time is what really gave me the idea that, or led me to understand that to know Jesus is so important, because the people that rallied around me were people who were committed to Jesus Christ. And among them was Father Jim Kavanagh. Among those who really rallied around me. I had to go to that funeral by myself. For some reason, my mom could not face it. But Jim Kavanagh had to go home to comfort my mom. That's how committed he was. And to me, he had such a powerful impact in my life because he knew Jesus and he wanted me to get to know Jesus through his own his experience. Now, later on, as I was ordained, and I could just put in parentheses that my mom was never a Catholic until, I believe, at my ordination. When she saw me lying there, with the litanies going on, afterwards she told me I wept. I was crying as I saw you lying there, and I asked her, Mom, why did you cry? She said, I don't know. I believe that our conversion took place there. And then she began to journey, trying to look for an opportunity to be received in the Catholic Church. She was already baptized. She wanted to know that Jesus who has led me in a different route than the rest of the family. But by then, the rest of the family had already joined me without me saying a word, except my mom, who was the last one. 2005. She was first of all received in the Catholic Church, and then the Lord called her to himself. Now, this 2005 is also a dramatic moment for me, in the sense that I was already working in the Vatican. And just to tell you, I don't think I knew Jesus enough until I went to a retreat in Assisi. And I was in Assisi for the 4th time. But this time I decided simply to take off from Rome, the Hulabadu of the Romans, and go to Assisi, a quiet city. And I went to the convent of the Sisters of Atonement, just above the convent of St. Clair. And there I spent 5 days of quiet prayer, but also tracing the footsteps of St. Francis. And I went up to the caves where St. Francis received the stigmata. And while I was there, something interesting happened to me. Something, I would say that the Lord speaking to me and telling me it's not enough to be a priest. What I require of you is detachment. And detachment, of course, I just lost my mom. That was one. But the Lord wanted me to detach even more, to be not tied to what I have, to the friends I have, but to get detached so that He can really penetrate into me. It's only then that I began a journey, I would say a journey inwards, of deeper knowledge of who the Lord is for me. I just stopped there and welcome Father Camacho.